I've been writing a lot over the past few weeks about my relationship with my former employer, a large media organization. And I was struck by the number of people who wrote back to express a sense of resonance they'd felt with the dilemma I described. Big institutions can be very alluring places. They can, of course, take care of our material needs, and they can also give us a sense of identity, status, a form of community. And all of those things can be tremendously valuable. At the same time, as the crisis developing all around us deepens, I think many of us are finding it harder to ignore the fact that many of these same institutions are very much a part of the problem rather than the solution. I experienced this dilemma particularly acutely as a former climate correspondent at Reuters, watching the company hosting an oil and gas conference in Houston, Texas last month, gathering more than 400 oil and gas and tech executives with the express intention of removing the pain points holding back faster production. This was the very same moment that wildfire smoke from the forest fires in Canada was shrouding New York, literally blanketing the Reuters office in Times Square. And I think many of us have similar moments where we recognize the contradictions in the systems that we're participating in. I've been fortunate in that I was able to leave that system to work in a much smaller organization that is much more aligned with my values. But it took me many years to make that jump. And in many ways, it was a jump I made involuntarily because of the difficulties I was facing within the organization. But I've been reflecting on the predicament that many of us face who are in these institutions, who feel that tension, but don't necessarily have an obvious option to leave. And I think it's very easy for that to become a source of tension, of distress. And it's important that we acknowledge that, look at it, and bring that reality into community, which is why I'm recording this message. Now, I don't have a preconceived answer or solution or piece of advice for anybody who finds themselves in that situation, facing that dilemma. But what's been coming up for me over the last few days is the opportunity that this dilemma presents for us to become more present to our own process in relationship to these institutions. And what I mean by that is, can we start to bring more awareness to the way we relate to these institutions, our workplace, how do we feel stepping into that field? At what points do we hold ourselves back, shut ourselves down, override our instincts? Where does that unease we may be experiencing come from? How does it present itself, whether it's in the thoughts we're having, sensations in our bodies, emotions, maybe there's some anxiety, fear, irritation. All of these phenomena are important because as we make more space for them, we can become more aware of our own process. And I strongly suspect that cultivating that awareness is what will point us eventually to the path of right action, whether that's staying in the position that we're in or in the organization that we're in, doing our best to use the advantages, the platform, the resources that are available to us to serve our values. And that can look like many different things to many different people. But we know deep down when we're acting in alignment, when our inner world and our outer actions are congruent. But we can also use this practice to become more aware of when those things are out of alignment. When we find ourselves overriding our instincts or our deepest aspirations out of an impulse to conform or a fear of what might happen if we start to push at some of those boundaries or question some of the unconscious agreements that we all automatically sign up to when we participate in these organizations. And so if you are sitting with that dilemma, that feeling of being part of a system that you know is ultimately not serving life, and yet there's enough there that is emergent, relational, nourishing even, to keep you engaged. Use this opportunity to observe yourself in relationship with that organization. Use it as a mirror to learn more about where you're at your best and where you hold back. And as you deepen that process, as you connect more directly with what's really going on for you at a deeper level, when you bring this observer self into play, I suspect that either you'll see opportunities for new ways of showing up within that organization, and that can look like lots of things, whether it's being a little bolder or a little more boundaried or even a little more creative in how you use that position to serve your values. Or it might lead to a deepening that opens you up to looking for new opportunities with new eyes, in a sense. Certainly, I never planned to work for a non-profit news organization. I mean, few years ago, that would have seemed to me to be a dreadful retrograde step in my career. But actually, the exact opposite has proven to be the case. I've been very happy in my new role outside the corporate walls, and very fortunate that it's allowed me to express myself, to allow my words and my actions to align much more closely with who I really am. So if you're in that space, if you're grappling with that dilemma, my invitation is to drop in more deeply to what that dilemma feels like, to really explore the edges of your relationship to the institution, the parts that feel emergent, innovative, relational, and the parts that feel frozen, repetitive, contracted. Rather than getting tied up in too much thinking and abstracting and strategizing, drop more deeply into your body, your emotions, your moment by moment experience, and let that be your guide to whether it's time to show up differently where you are, or open yourself up to something new. I've really loved the responses I've received in response to the posts I wrote about my Reuters experience. And if any of this has resonated at any level, then I'd obviously love to hear from you in the comments or directly over email. I suppose I should sign off. This is Matthew Green for Resonant World. Thank you for listening.